With the price of a new Wrangler as high as $80,000, it's out of a lot of people's range. And that's putting a lot of pressure on these older Jeeps. And don't be alarmed if you go to look at a TJ and you've checked the Kelley Blue Book prices and you find out that, wow, they're selling this thing for more than it was worth when it was new. Well, with the attrition rate, people wrecking them, the ones that have rusted away, the ones that have been damaged beyond repair, their numbers are getting fewer and fewer, putting upward pressure on the prices. So if you are looking for one, there are some things you need to consider before you pull the trigger and buy one. And if you're going to look at one, look it over carefully and look for some of these things, because they may just be the thing that determines whether you pull the trigger on it and you drive home with a classic Wrangler, or if you walk away. Choose wisely. If you can't easily shift the transfer case between two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, neutral, and four-wheel drive low, there could be a bigger issue. In four-wheel drive low, if you put it in gear and try to drive it and it pops out of four-wheel drive low, there is definitely a bigger problem. Now, if that transfer case does pop out of four low, there's a few possibilities that it might be. Number one, was it lifted? And was the lift done correctly? Because the factory shift linkage for the transfer case on these TJs was garbage. It was designed by an engineer for the sole purpose of impressing another engineer. This thing had multiple mounting points on different things that moved: engine, body, transmission, frame, and rubber mounts between all. Now what that did was that created a scenario where if you lifted it and it wasn't lifted properly, you may not be able to get it back into adjustment. Not a deal breaker. There are cable linkages that will solve that. Number two, and this one is a little bit more of a problem. Would I consider it a deal breaker? No. I did have to do it on this one after we'd owned it for about 3 years. The body mounts did rust through, and they were solid when we did the engine conversion. A year after that, they had rusted through and collapsed, and the body was literally floating on the frame. But what to look for as far as that goes is this.
Now y'all are probably wondering, what the hell is he talking about? Body mounts? I thought we were talking about shifters jumping out of four-wheel drive low. Yes, exactly. The misalignment caused from a body mount rusting through is more than enough to put a shift linkage, the transfer case linkage, out of adjustment to the point where it will no longer shift properly. It will not be fully engaged, and when you try to move forward or backward in four-wheel drive low, it will pop out of gear back into neutral.
You're going to come right down here and you're going to look up these body mounts. Now granted, we've got a 3-inch body mount lift because of the engine conversion, but right here around this area, it will rust through. Now don't panic. There are kits available. This has patch panels installed on it that you cut out the rust, you weld in new metal, problem solved, all good. It'll also rust through here, same spot, and it'll collapse all the way in. Your frame mounts will punch all the way in. Same with this front one. They will punch all the way through. But, like I say, there are patch panels. Now, would I consider the body mounts a deal breaker? No, I would not. However, that one can be a good leverage point to try to negotiate a lower price. And there's also the possibility that it might be a mechanical issue inside the transfer case. Although if you understand transfer cases and the internal workings, that's probably the least likely scenario. And let's talk briefly about pinion seal leaks. Now, it may come as a surprise to some of you, but some of these Jeeps actually got used off-road. And here's something that can happen, especially if people, previous owners, yada, 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 weren't diligent about cleaning them up after they take them off-road. You see these grooves in this pinion? Okay, now you could replace the seal on this, but it wouldn't solve the problem, because these pinion seals, or this pinion has actually worn grooves in here that even if you replace the pinion seal, it would still leak. But don't panic. These are only about $80. Anybody with any skill and a torque wrench can change these without upsetting the backlash on your ring and pinion gear. And the biggest elephant in the room on these TJs is their age. And at the time that they were built, unless it was applied by the dealership as a dealer added option, or if the first owner took it to someplace like Z-Bart, you know, a lot of you are probably too young to remember these commercials. Z-Bart, it's us or rust. But the inside of the frames weren't very well rust treated. And that is the one thing on buying one of these TJs that is the elephant in the room that would be the deal breaker for me. And that is, if you go down here, and I'm going to flip this camera around, the most common place where these rust is right behind the arches on the frame, both front and rear. Take you a hammer, take you a screwdriver, take a metal object, and hit them. Because I have gone to look at TJs before and taken the handle of a screwdriver, a plastic handle, and tapped on it and knocked a hole in the frame. And once it's that far gone, that becomes a deal breaker. This one, frame is very solid. So if you're looking at one that's got a frame that's like that, don't be afraid of it. And here's an example of some of the stuff to look for. Rust on the window pillars. Now a lot of these are going to be in worse condition than others. You'll find ones like this where they have actually tried to cover up rust with accessories. Let me get down here and show you. Now this one here, can't hardly see up underneath there, but it's rusting in the body behind the rock sliders. And this one, the body to frame mounts have already been redone. See a weld right here. Those have been redone. Now this has been lifted. Somebody actually did it right. It's got a double cardan drive shaft and a slip yoke eliminator. Now here's another one of the big things you got to watch out for when you're looking at a TJ. See the nice little oil drip right there? Well, that's coming down. That's actually motor oil. I was by here and looked at this the other day. That's not red. That's brown. So this one has a main seal leak, and that's one of the things you got to look out for. Not that an oil leak at the main seal is necessarily a bad thing, because honestly, Jeeps leak. And the best thing you can do sometimes is just check your oil weekly and not run it out of oil, because they're a 25-year-old Jeep. Now there's another thing too that some people will tell you about, some people won't. I don't know how true it is, but a lot of these older engines, if you switch them to synthetic oil, the seals weren't made for synthetic. So you might wind up creating a leak, and a lot of times it'll go away by just switching back to conventional motor oil.
Now, if you're one of those 92% that's not subscribed to the channel that keep coming in and checking out what we're doing, what are you waiting on? Subscribe. If you don't, we might start throwing rocks at you. Now, these are just a few of the things that you need to look for when you're checking out a TJ for possibly buying it. So treat it like you would any used car. Look at everything. But these are some of the major things that you need to pay attention to so you don't wind up getting burned. And once again, thanks for watching. And please do subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything. See ya.